accept refugees, for example. So that's a little bit what I also did in my own work. I spoke about the humanitarian border that comes up in refugee protection, right? And I think we are also already spoke about categorizations and classifications. There were some break in the room who have worked on this before, like Mani's work on the classifications of refugees between Nigeria and Niger, and how people also appropriate these categories. And we also already spoke about the borders and how the border can have different forms and different shapes. And I think that
kind of presentations all speak about everyday bordering in a certain sense, so how the border informs our everyday encounters and practices, and also sexualized violence maybe as a potential border that can be thought about. And I think it's interesting to keep in mind how specific forms of social cultural logics are at play when we speak about these forms of humanitarianism, right? There's now this work on diaspora humanitarianism that is especially I think in Somalia is being done. Diaspora groups who get active, but I think there might also be some problematic effects of solidarity and of self-organization that I'm interested in how they come out in the paper. So what kind of forms of exclusion might there be, what kind of forms of discrimination, but also other things that might be very specific to the context that the presentations speak about. So to keep this short, we have 10 minutes per presentation. I will give, every chair is a bit different, right? So today it's me. I will have a little paper that says there are 2 minutes left to every presenter. So I will put this in your face. And I will allow for questions of understanding after each presentation, but only understanding. So no comments, that will come afterwards in a general discussion. And I think then we can stick with what we did before, suggestions how to improve the paper, how to make it publishable, but also more conceptual questions. And please keep your questions and replies short. I think we risk losing a lot of very valuable contributions if we take too much time in every one of us, so it's good to keep it short, precise, and then allow for a lot of space. Okay, so I will leave it at that. We'll stick with the order. So first is Amira. Could you come here? Thank you so much. So Amira's work is on Egypt. Thank you for making the applause possible. And Amira is from the American University.
I'm done. You have already. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for the applause, for the round of applause. And please do it again after I'm done, so I feel good. I can't even remember the title of my presentation because we keep changing it all the time. I just want to say that this is a joint work with my colleague, Dr. Gerda Heck. We work together at the American University in Cairo. And even though we work in different research, focus, and population and projects, but we felt that, of course, drawing, upon this transformation that's happening globally and also in a country like Egypt, in the global south in general, if we take Egypt as an example, we examine both the Congolese and Sudanese in Cairo. So we felt this actually, we've been doing our work independently, but at some point we felt it's important to bring this comparative lens and also to come up with some probably patterns of, how people, migrants and refugees navigate their way in the city. I used the word migrants and refugees because not all the people in forced displaced people in Egypt are registered with UNHCR and recognized as refugees. Thank you very much. Okay, time starts. Okay, count. So I'm going to be very brief, hopefully. I'm not always brief, but I will save, and please ask any question or make any comments when the moderator, our moderator actually allows for that. Oh yeah, this is actually a cover slide, so we don't need to spend time on it. I also want to say maybe it would really be like this painting. These are all painting and artwork done by Sudanese and non-Sudanese refugees living in Egypt. And we're not using it only for decoration, but also that was part of our field work that I'm going to talk about soon. So we chose actually for now, this is work in progress, not the research, the field work in progress. We are done with our field work, but the paper itself is work in progress. We are attempting to reconceptualize migration governance, focusing on the global south, and as I said, taking Egypt as a case study. And also we are focusing on the urban mobility and displacement. It works even if I point here. So the paper, like any paper, has background, literature review. In the literature review and theoretical approach, we focus on three pillars: migrants and refugees as infrastructure. We also examine the concept of hostility that you are all familiar with, but also we take with us conviviality. And finally, we look at the everyday bordering and belonging, because there was a discussion here about where the borders start and end, and we believe that the borders are everyday. This is actually the part that is not still in progress, mainly the finding and analysis, because actually we are ending up using collaborative methodologies. We have now a substantial set of data that we need really to make our selection for this, limited small paper. And then, of course, we don't have a conclusion because this is work in progress, but we have some initial thoughts about how we think about this paper can contribute. We're all familiar with the intensifying conflicts in the MENA region, including the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, the Sudan War. And in that, Egypt has been always, but especially after the Sudan War, emerged as a critical node in the shifting migratory landscape of the global south. In our research framework, we utilize ethnographic border regimes analysis that moves beyond the state-centric securitization. We view the border as everyday, as I said, but also as a dynamic negotiation between state control and migration or migrants' autonomy. We focus specifically on migrants. We examine the border through the migrants' experiences, focusing on Sudanese and Congolese, and this hopefully can contribute to reconceptualizing migration governance in Africa. So I think you're all familiar with the large-scale mobility from Egypt, but also to Egypt. And today I focus on the to Egypt mobility. Even though, regardless of the numbers, we know that the largest nationality now is Sudanese, almost 1.1 million registered refugees in Egypt at the moment. More than 700,000 are Sudanese, followed by Syrians and other nationalities, as you can see here in the chart. And Egypt has been traditionally viewed as, in the literature, as a transit country. And this actually depiction of Egypt as a transit country is really highly contested, and especially with the closure of the borders, the European borders, South European borders. But then increasingly, Egypt now is recognized as a destination due to this securitization policies and Europe outsourcing border controls to countries of the South Mediterranean and the Middle East, and also because the national response of Egypt wanting to be part of these new policies. So as a result, Egypt now is a state of stuckness for migrants and refugees. People are stuck, they cannot go back to a war zone area, they cannot live forward. Egypt is not allowing really for local integration. Yeah. So it's very important when we talk about migrants and refugees in Egypt to remember the history, because migrants did not arrive in one day. Migrants did not arrive, how can I say it, without, it could be spontaneous, but actually there is prehistorical facts that bring people to, and also people did not become 1 million today. They have been coming in different periods and different times for different reasons. And for example, if we take the example of, and this is also another beautiful painting by South Sudanese refugees, Santo Mako. So if we go back to the history, and yesterday there was some discussion about the the Pan-Arabism and Pan-Africanism, the Arab unity, and Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser, the first or second president after the independence of Egypt, that's also contested. But he actually was pro-Arab unity and African unity, and he was actually a great support for African and Arab leaders in their pursuit to gain independence. And as we know, Egypt also played a great role in the creation of the Arab League and the League of Arab Nations, and also the African Union. At that time, of course, the organization of African unity. And as a result, many people actually, Egypt was actually an attractive, hub for people. There was actually proactive initiatives to bring Arab and African students, for example, to Egypt to study. And actually, when we do our ethnography at the moment, we can trace that some people now who are called refugees lived in Egypt for 30 years and 50 years since, during these times. Educational culture, radio station, the Sawt al-Arab, the voice of Arabs, and the African voice as well. Even though Congolese and Sudanese may be hard to compare, because actually Congolese are very, very tiny population in Egypt, but we believe that their historical roots are in a way similar, even though in different ways. So, but the point is, at this point, despite this history, and I'm talking here about the Arab unity and the African unity, not as a political term. I'm talking about a historical reality that brought these people to Egypt. So despite this long history, both Sudanese and Congolese really suffer legal restriction that undermine their future perspective in Egypt. I think it's also important to remember the securitization and mobility, and that Europe outsourcing its border control. In our methodology, we did collaborative methodology. We used the insider-outsider techniques, interviewing, and interactive techniques, including organizing exhibitions and concerts and different social and cultural activities for refugees that was actually requested by refugees. So both studies are multi-sited, long-term with the two communities. And hence we are aiming to bring a bottom-up perspective on governance. So the literature review, we actually deal with migrants as infrastructure, to highlight the role of migrants in creating networks and community institutions. We emphasize social capital, shared history, and mutual support as key infrastructure. And there are many, many examples of this, like this important NGO, Tafa'ul, in an area called Faisal. This is also from a Palestinian performance in one of our fieldwork ethnography activities. We also examined dialectic experience in Cairo between hospitality, and we remember Derrida, that's not taken for granted because it's also met with hostility. And within this hostility, conviviality comes as a messy expression of solidarity and support to overcome exclusion. Everyday bordering is an important issue, especially now in Egypt, because the borders is not one. There are multiple borders that migrants experience every day. And at the moment, there is increase in the last 3 months, increased turn on border enforcement, police raids, and this challenging navigating legal status for forced irregularity with reports of I'm scared now. Okay, I will go to conclusion. Okay. So we can talk more about everyday borders, about policing as a governance tool, about racialized gender and gendered policing, and what we call the ID monster. This is actually a Congolese soccer team in Cairo that was formed and trained by a pastoral who, after came to Egypt, started to play multiple roles. And here I will go to, migrants as infrastructure. I think I spoke about that. The ethnoscapes and community spaces, that has both psychological, spiritual, and material value in their life, the role of refugee activists as also infrastructure, and the social media. We can talk more about that. I'm very sorry that I had to go very fast. So the conclusion from here is that within the inter-regional mobility, and Egypt as example, there is overarching exclusionary policies, and there is bottom-up governance. Integration relies on self-organized practices of migrants' communities rather than formal governance. Recognizing informal structures challenge conventional governance structures. And social interaction in the urban space highlight the significance of emerging migration infrastructure, opens discussion of movement, mobility, and belonging, resilience in the face of policing, and especially at the moment, urban life characterized by conviviality amid increased policing, migrants function as their own infrastructure to counter state control and UNHCR nexus. In Egypt, Cairo neighborhoods such as Faisal and Ard al-Liwa, infrastructure is quite visible of migrants, and the concepts of infrastructure migrants initiatives are vital. This is the very last slide, I promise, Laura. And now it's not, yeah. This is also a beautiful painting by Sudanese artist, Umayma Mohammed Abdel Latif. And I conclude with this statement saying that migrants' collective arrangements serve as vital collective repositories and social safety nets, generating material coping mechanisms that exist outside formal state or international aid structures. For Sudanese and Congolese, these initiatives are not merely survival strategies, but expression of continuity, of rooting, of political agency that challenge the crisis narrative often imposed on African mobility. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Amira, and sorry for being a bit hard on time, but if we take too much time, then then we also don't have space for discussion anymore. And I read your full paper, and I know there's a lot of great work in there, so if you want to know more about it, then you can also ask Amira for her paper, but it was a very comprehensive presentation, so thank you very much. And I see 2 hands. I remind you, it's only for questions of understanding now. Anyone? Okay, first you, and then you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Maybe I know what you mean by infrastructure because I use some of your colleagues' work on infrastructure and religion and migration, but maybe it would be best, because when I got the concept before, it was also strange for me, because in the geography, infrastructure means something completely different. So maybe it would be best to clarify what you mean by infrastructure for the rest of the audience. But I know it, but just clarify it.
Merci pour cette brillante présentation. Allez, lorsque je vous ai suivi sur les questions migratoires au niveau de l'Égypte, le constat qu'on fait que l'Égypte reçoit beaucoup de migrants de la RDC, de l'Érythrée, des Soudanais. Alors, la question que je me pose aujourd'hui, est-ce qu'il y a une stratégie pour l'insertion de ces réfugiés-là? Sinon, tel que c'est fait, je pense qu'on aura des difficultés pour scolariser tous ceux qui arrivent, les soigner. Est-ce qu'il y a une stratégie de prise en charge de ces réfugiés-là au niveau de l'Égypte?
Okay, thank you so much for these questions, but they are questions of content, both of them, so we will answer them after in the general discussion. Amira, can you note them down for yourself and then you answer them later? So Nadifa, could you come to the front? So Nadifa Njama is next from Mombasa.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nadifa Jama from Kenya, and today I'm honored to present my paper on sexual harassment and protection gaps at the Horn of Africa and forced displacement. Why this region? The Horn of Africa is made up of 5 countries: Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, Sudan, and Uganda. These are the countries that host some of the world's largest and most protracted refugee populations. And in this context, humanitarian system prioritize food, shelter, and emergency health, everyday gendered violence remains structurally invisible. So displacement intensifies pre-existing gender inequalities, creating new vulnerability at the intersection of aid dependency and power. Why this study? Looking at this study, we are able to identify some of the protection gap indicators. For example, looking at this data, you see that sexual harassment, the data is severely underreported, and formal harassment policy is largely absent, and GB focus in camp policy is GB focus in camp policy focuses on extreme violence only and leaves out some of the issues regarding sexual harassment. And women's self-reporting access is very, very limited, and livelihood access for women is restricted and very informal. Community safety network present but very unrecognized. So while GBV data tracks extreme violence like rape, everyday sexual harassment in survival spaces remains unassured, unmeasured, unaddressed, and outside the scope of existing protection framework. The problem is that sexual harassment, again, is among the displaced women is purely investigated, hence the need for this particular research. The objective is one, we wanted to examine the structural nature, to analyze sexual harassment as a structural protection gap embedded within the humanitarian governance in forced displacement settings. And second, to understand the women's experiences, document the lived experiences, perceptions, and daily coping strategies of displaced women across 5 country contexts. And third objective is to assess reporting barriers, to identify the social, institutional, and economic barriers that prevent women from disclosing harassment to authorities. And fourth was to inform potential framework, derive evidence-based implications for gender-sensitive humanitarian policy and survivor support mechanisms. The theoretical framework, we adopted a feminist theory. We looked at forms of gendered power, which looks at forms of gender power relations, experiences of violence, experience of violence by women in both the social and personal status. Human security perspective, which looks at security beyond armed conflict in order to include dignity, livelihood, and well-being. And third, intersectionality, where we are looking at gender plus displacement status, ethnicity, and class, and increased vulnerability. These frameworks cumulatively establish sexual harassment as a structural problem that has a direct relationship with gendered power relations, humanitarian governance, and an equal access to resources. So our conceptual framework, we're looking at the correlation between the independent variables such as humanitarian aid dependency, which are humanitarian aid dependency, weak camp governance, economic marginalization, disrupted social networks, gender-blind policy designs, and how they relate to the dependent variables on sexual harassment experienced by the displaced women, while the intervening variables like power dynamics and fear of reporting and women coping agencies. We adopted a qualitative feminist research approach where we conducted that involved 35 participants who are all above 18 years using a purposive sampling technique. This is also because of the nature of the study and confidentiality issues and access to resources as well. So we issued 30 semi-structured interviews with displaced women aged 18 years plus, focusing on personal narratives and experiences across all the 5 country sites. We worked with contact person who are research assistants and that were willing to support. We did this because we wanted to understand the qualitative and in-depth nature of their experiences. We also conducted focus group discussions at community level. We listened to conversations exploring collective coping strategies, social dynamics, and shared perception of the safety and displacement settings. We also reviewed few documents, reviewed review of humanitarian organization reports, such as the UNHCR, protection briefs, and policy documents on gender-based violence in displacement context. Oh, yeah, so our primary study area was the Dab camp, and the Dab is one of the largest camp in East Africa. It hosts over 860,000 refugees, and these refugees are coming from Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, and Uganda, and they're coming here because of different forces, including climate vulnerabilities, civil war, like the case of Somalia and Sudan, and political instability. So what we found out is, one, we realized that harassment is concentrated in everyday survival spaces, not at the margins of displacement in life. Some of the places that were key areas were food distribution centers. Aid distribution hierarchy creates coercive power over women who depend on rations for survival. Second place that we identified was water collection points. And these water collection points, and something about it is that they are located at the periphery of the camp. So it means women have to walk along a distance and navigate around some routes to be able to reach these water points. And this is the time where their vulnerability actually increases to sexual harassment. Second is shelters and sanitation facility. Poorly lit communal facilities with minimal privacy expose women to harassment with little recourse. And I'd like to really amplify the presentation of my colleague about WASH. This is one of the areas that actually women face more harassment. And also, lastly, informal workplace markets. You find that in these settings, most of the people that hold livelihood opportunity for livelihood, like informal job opportunity, are actually women are more vulnerable because they're exposed. They have to do things that against them to be able to get that opportunity to work for those employers. So we also found out that we had immense reporting barriers, and this was driven due to fear of social stigma, and because the victims did not want to expose themselves because the community will see them differently. Like they might even get excluded from social events. Risk of retaliation from perpetrator, especially when the perpetrator holds a power dynamic. There's loss of humanitarian aid, same linked to that if the perpetrator is someone that is on authority over the rations, and distrust of authorities. There's an issue with the authorities that are in charge to protect them. They're not really accountable for their actions. There is also fractured social capital and weak governance, which is quite related. So we had some of the narratives, like one of the participants said, the water point is far from the shelter. When you go alone, men sometimes wait there and make comments or try to approach you. Many of us now go in groups, so they form like a woman agency to be able to survive in such areas. If I report, there is a risk that tomorrow I'll not receive water or food. It is better to stay silent. Unfortunately, this is the experience that they have to undergo, especially when the power dynamics and the perpetrator holds some access to the rations. So agency and coping strategies, you learn who to avoid and when to go. Sometimes you just pretend not to hear the comments or walk away. So some of the structural issues that were identified is power inequalities in humanitarian systems. We had aid dependency and economic vulnerability, weak camp governance, and gender-blind protection framework. Some of the women agency and coping strategies that were identified is the collective movement, where women coordinate travel to water points, distribution centers, and markets in groups to reduce individual exposure. We had peer support networks, spatial risk mapping, everyday negotiation for their rights. Theoretical contribution, the study challenges the neutral humanitarian space assumption that humanitarian infrastructure are not safety neutral. It says that the humanitarian infrastructure are not safety-neutral environment. They can reproduce and entrench gendered power hierarchy when authority over essential resources is concentrated in specific actors. Second, it theorizes harassment as a structural and not incidental. Moving beyond the individual perpetrator-focused framework, the study shows harassment is generated by the institutional conditions of displacement, aid dependency, weak governance, and gender-blind policy design. Third, it extends feminist security theory by foregrounding everyday insecurity alongside acute violence. The study extends feminist and human security frameworks to account for routine, spatially embedded forms of gendered harm. And lastly, it advances human security debates. Insecurity in displacement is shown to encompass social, economic, and psychological dimensions, not only physical violence, demanding broader conceptual tools for protection and analysis. As we conclude, I'll skip that. Let's go to the conclusion. Sexual harassment in displacement is structural, generated by aid dependency, weak governance, and gender-blind humanitarian framework, is not a series of isolated incidents. And the reporting reflects rational responses to structural risk, fear of losing aid, retaliation, and social rupture, since silence is the survival strategy, unfortunately, and not a communication gap. Displaced women demonstrate significant agency through collective safety practices. This must be formally recognized and supported by protection system and also given resources. Humanitarian actors must shift from emergency response paradigm towards sustained gender-sensitive protection that addresses both extreme violence and everyday security. We're done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you want to hear more about the policy recommendations that we had to cut short now, then you can just go and talk to Nadifa. Is there a question of understanding, only understanding, something you didn't get in the presentation? Okay, I see one hand.
Thank you for the presentation. My question is that how do the experiences of harassment vary across gender, age, and social identity? For example, when we look at unaccompanied minors, we also talk of widows and also persons living with disability.
Okay, that's again not a question of understanding. So can you answer it later, Nadifa? Sorry for being a bit strict on this, but we want to keep the flow for the time.
Just to clarify, closely related, was there an aspect of the work that looked at the psychosocial effects of silence on the respondents? Because it's a good coping strategy, yes, so that you get access to aid, but there are psychosocial effects on the individual. I don't know if there was an aspect of the work that looked at that aspect too. Thank you.
Okay, again, we parked this one, and sorry, it's closed now for questions of understanding. Maintenant, on va à la troisième présentation de Wilson. Il va nous parler sur les jeunes déplacés au Bénin.
Bonjour à tous et à toutes, je suis Wilson Rodolphe et je m'intéresse particulièrement aux dynamiques d'exclusion sociale et de vulnérabilité. Alors, on pense que les déplacements commencent toujours par la migration d'un lieu à un autre, mais généralement, ils commencent bien avant par une exclusion. En Afrique, lorsqu'on parle de déplacement, on associe souvent cela aux conflits armés, aux catastrophes environnementales, aux migrations transfrontalières. Mais ces approches dominantes mettent l'accent sur la mobilité géographique et oublient un point très important. Ce point, il s'agit de des déplacements moins visibles liés à l'exclusion sociale en prenant des cas, et j'ai pris pour cette étude le cas des jeunes marginalisés au Bénin. Dans mon travail, j'ai remarqué que les études parlent très peu des formes de déplacement qui ne sont pas visibles ou reconnues institutionnellement. Cependant, des processus comme des stigmatisations ou la marginalisation peuvent pousser des individus à quitter leurs espaces sociaux, même sans bouger physiquement. Alors, pour analyser cela, nous avons adopté une approche sociologique en nous basant sur des observations participantes, des discussions informelles avec des jeunes vulnérables, et nous avons par la suite analysé des pratiques de solidarité et et de solidarité communautaire. Et pour des sources complémentaires, j'ai utilisé des rapports d'ONG, des documents de santé publique et de la littérature académique. Nos résultats montrent d'abord que les jeunes vivent différentes formes d'exclusion sociale. Ces exclusions peuvent être familiales, communautaires ou institutionnelles. Par exemple, certains jeunes sont rejetés par leur famille, d'autres sont stigmatisés dans leur communauté ou encore rencontrent des difficultés d'accès aux services, notamment de santé. Dans certains cas, ces situations conduisent aussi à des formes d'auto-exclusion où les individus évitent certains espaces pour se protéger du rejet. Par exemple, sur le terrain, j'ai eu à discuter de vive voix avec certaines jeunes personnes qui, à cause de leur statut sérologique, se sont vus discriminés, stigmatisés dans leur environnement. Ils ont dû migrer ailleurs pour quand même protéger leur santé mentale, pour mieux vivre et mieux s'épanouir. L'exclusion sociale agit ici comme une véritable force de déplacement en poussant les individus hors de leurs espaces d'appartenance. Face à ces situations, ces jeunes développent également des formes de solidarité communautaire comme l'entraide, le soutien ou le partage d'informations qui constituent des mécanismes de protection importants. Ces résultats permettent de repenser la notion de déplacement forcé. Ils montrent que le déplacement ne se limite pas à un mouvement géographique, mais peut aussi être compris comme un processus d'exclusion sociale. Cela invite donc à élargir les cadres d'analyse et à mieux intégrer ces formes invisibles dans les recherches et les politiques de protection. Alors, comme je le disais tantôt, certaines formes de déplacement restent invisibles dans les analyses classiques. Les expériences des jeunes marginalisés révèlent des dynamiques d'exclusion sociale, des formes locales de solidarité de protection, et ces observations invitent à repenser les cadres analytiques des déplacements forcés dans les contextes africains contemporains. Et pour terminer, je dirais que le déplacement ne commence pas toujours par un départ, mais souvent par une rupture sociale. Je vous remercie.
Félicitations. Hein? Si vous voulez, il y a encore quelques minutes pour vous, si vous voulez élaborer un peu. Mais c'était même pas 4 minutes, hein? Vous avez dit.
Alors, merci beaucoup. J'aimerais profiter de ce panel quand même pour inviter tout un chacun de nous à quand même être bienveillant parfois avec notre environnement immédiat, parce que parfois à travers nos comportements, nos gestes, nos regards, on pousse parfois certains à s'exclure sans le reconnaître directement. Du coup, je nous invite à une bienveillance quand même envers les autres, bien qu'en étant conscient de leur peut-être statut sérologique ou de leur peut-être orientation sexuelle, on peut quand même essayer d'être bienveillant envers eux pour quand même leur permettre de mieux vivre et de ne pas se sentir exclus. Parce qu'on doit tous quand même lutter contre la discrimination, la stigmatisation. Et comme on le dit bien en juridiction, nous naissons libres et égaux en droit et voilà. Merci.
Félicitations pour être très bref et succinct. So we already go to the. Is there a question of understanding? I remind question of understanding only if you didn't get anything that was presented. Okay, we leave it for the discussion. Is a question of understanding? Quelles sont les formes invisibles de? Okay. Ça, c'est une question de compréhension.
Comme je le disais tantôt, les formes invisibles de déplacement sont souvent causées par l'exclusion. Quand on commence déjà par discriminer, stigmatiser les autres, déjà partant de leur situation sanitaire ou de leur vulnérabilité, par exemple les personnes avec un handicap, si on commence déjà par les exclure de nos espaces, je crois que ce sont des formes invisibles de déplacement que nous induisons par nos gestes. Parce que déjà, quand tu exclus quelqu'un du fait de sa différence, il est obligé d'aller ailleurs pour se sentir quand même à l'aise avec lui-même et avec son environnement. Je pense que ce sont les formes invisibles d'exclusion qui ne sont toujours pas répertoriées dans les annales de discussion. Voilà, merci.
D'accord, merci beaucoup. Donc, on va avoir la discussion générale après.
Good morning. Yeah. I'm Baba Bumi Williams from Nigeria, and I will be presenting on Beyond the Camps, the transformation of the Goza internally displaced person in Jemeta, Yola, Adamawa State, Nigeria. Okay. Globally, most IDPs in protracted conflict areas do not stay in formal camps. Most times, the government agencies and international humanitarian agencies or NGO, they build formal camps for IDPs for them to stay. And most times, the camps are very limited in spaces, and they are not actually enough to actually go around the enormous number of persons that have been displaced. In Nigeria, about 3 million internally displaced persons have fled the Boko Haram armed conflict in northeastern region, seeking refuge in other parts of the country, and in particular, Adamawa State. Adamawa State is chosen for this study because of the closeness to where the armed conflict actually took place, as in the city, that is the state capital of Adamawa State, Jemeta, Yola, as you can see on the topic earlier. The Jemeta is the commercial city of Adamawa State, while Yola is the state capital, as in is the city, as in is the other city that act as the state capital. Then 2014, before I go on, 2014 was the peak of the Boko Haram incident in the sense that it was that 2014 that the Boko Haram invaded most of the cities, especially in the northern part of Adamawa State, from Mubi to Madagali to Mechika, and even Goza as a town on its own, because Goza borders both Adamawa and Borno states. The people of Goza are also in Madagali and shares border with and also in Borno State. So the displacement caused by the insurgency triggered the Nigerian government and humanitarian agencies to establish over 1,000 camps across the states in the northeastern part of Nigeria. Less than 10% of the IDPs stay in camp. So you can imagine that from this number, 3 million, just probably 10% living in camp. And the other 92% of this IDP are hosted by low-income communities, which further strain already overstretched services and resources, because you have infrastructural deficit already, and they go there, overcrowd the place, and it becomes a societal problem. Furthermore, these IDPs that decide to move to host community are often off the humanitarian radar, thereby making them seek protection and durable solution through other means. When they came to Yola and other communities, in fact, there were times that when they were moving, they said, okay, I'll get there, let me don't preempt myself. Most empirical studies have been carried out are focused on the plight of IDPs and their precarious situation in camps around the country. And their vulnerability, because most times the camps are always in a deplorable situation, and most of them, when I ask them, why are you not staying in camp, they said, no, they can't stay in camp because they won't be able to live their life, and they will be so constrained and restrained that such that it becomes very difficult for them to even live. And some of them are too kind of proud that, no, I can't be begging for peanuts and hustling for the small pieces of bag of rice and spaghetti and noodles that they'll be giving in camp. So it is imperative to note that the limited studies have been conducted on IDPs living in host community in Nigeria and how they have been able to transform their lives from a state of precarity to safety. This study actually look at how the IDP staying in host community transform their life from the stage of being ruptured. That is when their life was ruptured at the point of the Boko Haram attacks. Because during the Boko Haram attacks, their social capital was actually brought to the barest minimum. For you to actually live your life well, you need this social capital around you and all that. But you see a situation whereby their parents were killed, their siblings were killed, and even their farms were taken away. Their farmland was actually adopted and invaded on, such that they don't have, they had to even flee. At the initial stage, they fled to the mountainous region because the place in borders, the place has to do with mountains. That is the Mandara Mountains. The highest peak is at Cameroon. So the next slide. Okay, my research questions are: in what ways are the lives of the IDP ruptured? How were the IDPs received? What was the process through which their life were transformed? In answering these questions, two theories were adopted. They are resilience theory and social capital theory. I actually adopted these two theories because of what I saw during the field work, and the resilience theory has to do with one bouncing back from a kind of shock, from a kind of failure or a setback that has happened to you already, and you have to as an internat, you have to increase your internal capacity and become strong so that you can actually how will I put it now, bring back your self-esteem back and all that. So social capital theory was actually adopted too because of the fact that when I was interviewing them, the IDPs lost their family and their loved ones, which is like the binding capital. We have binding capital, we have the bridging capital, and and even some of their belongings to their physical capital too was actually lost. Their houses were burnt, and they don't have anything other than themselves. And in fact, some of them. Okay, let me go on with. Okay, for the theoretical framework, I actually integrated social capital theory and resilience theory together. This is the host community encircled, the social capital, which has to do with trust, social network, and the social norm, which at the point of the Boko Haram incident, they were actually down weak, and the IDPs became very vulnerable at that point, and their resilience was gone and all that. So methodology, exploratory design, qualitative in-depth interview, and key informant interview was adopted, and I used content analysis. With the sampling techniques was purposive and snowballing techniques. Sample size was 43, 20 from Jambutu and 23 from Jemeta. This is the map of the study area. You can see the Adamawa. Then this is Jambutu and Jemeta in the yellow colored stuff there. Okay, ruptured lives of IDPs, discussion of findings. Okay, let me quickly go to the innovation and the tenacity. Because when you look at when their life were ruptured, they actually had to move from villages to villages, seeking for refuge. But at times, there were some villages that would accept them. At times, some villages will just tell them, okay, sleep, and the next morning you find your way. So, but all throughout their journey, they didn't really find this protection they needed at the initial stage, and they had to find their way to city. Majority of them had to find their way to city. Then when they got to the city, in fact, it was really scary for those living in the city at the initial stage, especially because most of them, they were Christians, and so you'd see some Muslims too among them. So they had to actually go to church. That is the EYN, that is the Church of the Brethren, and the Catholic Church, because that is their major churches they go to. So they actually went there, and the Reverend Father at the St. Teresa Church was actually skeptical because the Bishop of Yola wasn't around, and when they came in their large number, they were like, he was like, how can he actually accept these people? He was fearful. But he had to call the bishop who was not around then. Then the bishop told him that, okay, you can take them in, and they had to close the primary school where they run. They closed it down for them, and they stayed there for a while. And the EYN too, the same thing they did, the Church of the Brethren. So after then, the church started looking for ways through which they can actually survive, because they looked at the fact that the church cannot continue to cater for their needs because of the expenses. The government wasn't coming in, and other humanitarian agency wasn't coming in for them. So they put them in groups, and what they did was that they actually gave them some money, some 5,000, some 10,000 naira. That is like $3, $2, depending on what they want to do. So they started, and it was at this stage that even strangers and friends and family came to their rescue too, around Yola and Jemeta, Jambutu Oasis. They came to their rescue. In fact, the research assistant I used was actually, we told him that he actually, at a point, he had like 70 IDPs that he was feeding in his house. So this is the grain market that they established. This is the chairman of the grain markets, and now in fact, trucks come from all over Nigeria to get grains from here. That is the Jimeta grain market. This is the first of its kind, because initially they had to go to Borno State to get these things and all that, but now they can actually get these things. It reduces traveling time and all that. So this is a fish market that was relocated from Borno State because of the displacement, because this is the secretary. And the story of this, of them arriving here is kind of, you see social capital displaying itself here, because the chairman of this, they made the Adama a local, the chairman, so that they can have a space here. Because if they don't, because they are mostly Goza people, they don't have what they call it. They don't have stay in the mainstream Adamawa state. So what they do was that they used an indigene of this place that is very close to the Lamido of Adamawa to get the space here. So you have, in fact, this is a multi-billionaire fish market right now, that they started from the scratch and all that. This is my research assistant and all that. Then, yeah. Oh? Okay. Yeah. Conclusion. One thing I observe is that those that have weak capital and very weak resilience could not actually transform their life. That is, then with those that have very strong social capital, which Afas was talking about infrastructure. It is social capital. With strong social capital and strong resilience, they actually transform their life, and they impacted positive to their environment and the economy of the community where they are staying becomes larger. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will have a short coffee break now, because we also have an early lunch. So it allows us to have, like, let's say 20 to 25 minutes of coffee break now until 11:20. What time is it? 10, 20. And then afterwards we will have the discussion. So please keep your questions in mind, and then we will have like about 40 minutes of discussion for this session. Thank you so much. Yes. Okay, so we have about 1 hour for the discussion. Ayrton, correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah? Good. Nadifa. Yeah. Yes. Yes, hang on. I see some very pressed people there. So we will start the general discussion now. I will take a first round and then we will have a second round. So I give numbers again, okay? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, whoa, that's a lot already. Okay, and we have a microphone that's circulating. Is it okay if you do it? Or? But it's not active yet, no?
Okay, sure. Great presentation. My question is to Latifa. I just want to find out if you interviewed the camp authorities or if there were any key informant interviews. And then also, the second question would be, did you find out if those who are harassing these women were actually the refugees or the local people, or combined? Just that. Thank you.
Thank you. So mine probably, I'll start, once again, thank you, great presentation. I'll start with Amira. My first concern was whether you looked at protracted stay and its influence or effect on solidarity. For instance, if somebody comes in, maybe the earlier on welcome is very warm, but subsequently, is it the same? How does protracted stay, especially for those who have been there for so long, how does that influence or affect solidarity subsequently? And then to Latifa, I think I asked Latifa's question earlier, whether you looked at psychosocial effects on silence as a coping strategy or survival strategy as well. For Rudolph, I had a lot of questions because my first concern was whether you looked at gender classification in your respondents. Is it males who are facing this displacement more, or is females? Were there gender classifications in your respondents? Beyond that, age range. Which age gap? Are they matured individuals? Are they younger? Besides, is there a reflection on the socioeconomic status of the individual influencing their ability to move physically, or their inability to move and stay even though they feel secluded or excluded? And then there was another question on, so in Ghana there's something silently coming up. Individuals who are, let me say, having some particular sexual orientations who are also facing this silent exclusion. So did that also show up in your work as well? I think that's all for now. Thank you.
That's a lot already. Great question.
Thank you so much. My question is for Amira as well. So the one question that I had is, you spoke about sort of informal governance structures that are challenged by informal governance structures. Yeah. And I was just wondering about the relationship between the two. You know, maybe you could use an example to explain how do they run in parallel? Are they in conflict? Are they in tension? Do they complement each other? I would just love to see maybe from one example. And then the second thing was that I really love how you're bringing in art as a way of sort of communicating knowledge and producing knowledge. And then this is an ad break for my colleague's work at the moment. I don't know if you heard about it, but it's called the Atlas of Uncertainty. So it's my colleagues Lauren Landau and Carolyn Kiato. And they're also bringing, they're looking at African cities through mobility, but sort of through this question of, what if we actually think about African cities not as, chaotic and ungoverned, etc., but as looking at them as the future of city life, of having learned how to live with uncertainty, and actually we can learn so much from that. So they also brought in like very different types of knowledge production. So it was art, which was like hardcore statistics, but then it was also storytelling. There's a migrating exhibition that's happening. So I was just thinking if this sort of art aspect of it, that might be something. And they did it in Nairobi and Accra and Johannesburg. Yeah. It's called Atlas of Uncertainty. Yeah, I'll send you the link, but for everyone, it's a really, really cool project.
Okay,
Thanks.
I suggest we take number 4 and 5 still, and then we have the first round of responses. And I just wanted to remind all of you to keep your questions and comments short, so we have more time for shared discussion. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup pour votre présentation. J'ai une question pour Amira. Comment se déroule le processus d'intégration des migrants dans votre territoire de recherche? C'est-à-dire sur le plan religieux, comment les migrants sont intégrés? Est-ce qu'ils ne sont pas confrontés à une exclusion? Parce que d'autant plus qu'on sait que l'Égypte est un grand pays musulman. Et souvent la religion des pays d'origine peut être différente de celle des pays hôtes. Donc comment se passe l'intégration des migrants au niveau des pays hôtes? Et j'ai une autre question pour Rodolphe. Rodolphe, je vous ai entendu parler de l'exclusion, de la marginalisation des jeunes. Mais dans votre communication, je n'ai pas beaucoup fait attention à la marginalisation liée aux questions religieuses. Parce qu'on sait qu'au Sénégal, des fois, il y a des communautés, par exemple, si tu appartiens à une communauté et que tu te convertis, des fois, souvent tu es exclu ou bien tu es marginalisé parce que tout simplement tu as choisi une autre religion, différente de ta religion d'origine. Donc je voulais savoir, est-ce que au niveau du Bénin, il y a des marginalisations qui sont liées également aux questions religieuses? Merci beaucoup.
Okay, and number 5, yes, here in the front.
Merci. Je félicite tout le monde, tous les présentateurs. J'avais déjà posé la question à Amra et je pose ma question maintenant à Nadifa. Nadifa parlait de la question de harcèlement sexuel. Je voulais comprendre, est-ce que tu as pu identifier les types de harcèlement sexuel? À quel moment on identifie que telle femme a subi un harcèlement? Et si vous avez catégorisé, quels sont les types les plus fréquents? Est-ce que vous avez dans votre travail aussi fait cet exercice de pouvoir identifier les acteurs? Quels sont les acteurs de ces violences sexuelles? À l'AVO, la question que je me pose, c'est que lorsque tu parles de l'exclusion sociale, et tu as oublié quelque chose de l'auto-exclusion. On peut avoir aujourd'hui peur ou le jugement des autres au lieu de s'intégrer, mais on a peur de s'intégrer. C'est l'auto-exclusion. Est-ce que tu as vu ces questions-là? On peut aussi avoir des sentiments de se dire que je ne peux pas être un fardeau pour les autres et on se replie. Ça aussi, c'est l'auto-exclusion. On n'est pas toujours dans une exclusion sociale. Il y a aussi des gens qui s'auto-excluent dans une société. Il faut voir aussi des deux aspects. Je pense que ça serait encore plus bénéfique. Et enfin, pour Baba Bouni, et les personne ne veut être un PDI ou une personne déplacée interne. Personne ne veut quitter son territoire. Donc lorsqu'on quitte un territoire, ça veut dire qu'il y a des causes ou des raisons. Mais quand on vous suit, je n'ai pas vu les raisons et je vois seulement que les gens se sont déplacés. Je me pose quelles ont été les questions ou les causes qui ont poussé ces individus-là à quitter leur territoire.
Okay,
merci.
Merci. Juste à Idrissa, est-ce que vous pouvez répéter votre question à Amira parce qu'il y avait un problème d'interprétation, je pense.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Je voulais juste savoir comment se passe l'intégration des migrants au niveau des pays hôtes. D'autant plus qu'on sait que l'Égypte est un grand pays musulman. Et les migrants peuvent avoir une religion différente de celle du pays hôte. Comment se passe donc l'intégration des migrants au niveau des pays hôtes? Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas des exclusions?
So great. So this is the first round, and then we have the second round of those who have the numbers 6 to 9, I think. And we will add a few more questions. Sorry. So I will give everyone like 2 to 3 minutes to reply. Chacun a 2 à 3 minutes pour répondre, et je commence ici.
Alors, merci beaucoup pour toutes vos questions et les apports. Alors, j'ai noté la question parlant, est-ce que les hommes et les femmes font face aux déplacements invisibles dont vous parlez dans votre recherche? Bien évidemment que les deux sexes sont inclus dans les déplacements invisibles, que ce soit les hommes et les femmes, mais il y a un accent plus particulier sur les groupes vulnérables. En parlant de groupes vulnérables, je vais parler des minorités de sexe et de genre, notamment les personnes handicapées, les femmes vulnérables, voilà. Après cela, vous avez demandé... est-ce qu'il y a des déplacements dans mon pays liés à la religion? Il faudrait avouer que chez moi actuellement au Bénin, nous n'avons pas de cas de déplacement invisible liés à la religion parce que le Bénin est un pays qui a quand même réussi ou qui réussit quand même à avoir une cohésion interreligieuse avec toutes les religions. Donc chez moi actuellement, on n'a pas de déplacement à cause d'une religion autre que celle de la localité. Après cela, il y a l'auto-exclusion. Ouais. Merci pour cet apport. Je l'avais mentionné dans ma présentation, mais peut-être parce que j'étais stressé, j'ai oublié de le lire. Merci beaucoup d'être revenu là-dessus. Et j'ai marqué également que nous avons l'auto-exclusion qui oblige parfois certaines personnes à se retirer de la société pour ce sentiment de fardeau pour les autres qui les oblige parfois à se retirer et à aller se cacher ailleurs pour leur mieux-être. Voilà, je crois que j'ai répondu à toutes les questions. Merci.
I think he does have mic now, but you can speak loud.
Okay, thank you very much. I from this first section of the question, I don't think I have any question.
There was a question on what are the reasons for displacement.
Okay. The major reason for displacement is the Boko Haram and conflicts. Boko Haram insurgency group that started in 2008 and peaked in 2014.
Juste vraiment un signe. Est-ce que c'est encore possible d'écouter la traduction? Oui. Okay, then Amira.
Okay, thank you. So I will go back to Asid's question about what is infrastructure. So basically infrastructure for migrants in that case, and specifically means when people start to arrive in the city, start to navigate their way, and they actually through their social and material action, they steal the public affairs to create their own space. So basically this is how they create infrastructure. And the Malik Simon, as we know, expanded this concept to include people also, and ideas and spaces and shared history and shared material. So this basically all creates unique hubs and networks or infrastructure. And we here try in our research to put, to place migrants in the center to see how they can influence and shape the city and growth, of course they have influence, but also they shape and restructure the city with all this infrastructure and ideas. Of course, this is also as the social capital and social theory by Bourdieu, and the network theory is also in place here. So I hope this is clear. So yeah, so basically people create infrastructure, but also people themselves are infrastructure. And there was a question about the social strategy for Sudanese migrants. I'm really sorry, I have to say that this question was not very clear to me. Maybe it's like a broader question that we can get it in the next round of questions, or maybe discuss it in the final discussion. I'm very sorry about that. I didn't get the question fully. And for Sarah, yes, protracted state actually has an influence, but also it's not taken for granted. Whether, don't have been staying in a protracted period, do they have important history shared with the host, community or the host country, or not? Like Congolese, for example, have been for really long, but they are among the most vulnerable groups because they are very small, and even the diversification within that community, due to their limited number, is not big. they're all refugee or refugee-likely situation, and they are actually severely targeted. Unlike Sudanese, who are also targeted, but because they have a larger communities and diverse communities, old and new, and pre-established ones, they have, for example, in terms if we use infrastructure, the Sudanese infrastructure is much more visible than the Congolese in the area. I think because of the protraction, but also for the shared history and the resources that migrants bring with them. For Rihanna, the relationship between migrants governance and government governance, it's like a dialectic relationship. It's like always counteracting this by grassroots infrastructure or governance, always used to counteract the police, violence and security restricting police security measures. So, for example, WhatsApp, for example, is used to send alerts some morning when there is a police raid in a certain neighborhood. So the police coming to Ardelewa, migrants start to send messages for each other. There's so many examples. The schools actually, education governance was taken care completely until very recently by the migrants, by the CBOs, the community-based organizations. There was what is called community schools, and there were thousands of them in Egypt. But in the last, heat wave against migrants, the government closed down all these schools and said they will see how do you regulate it. And for the catalog, unfortunately I didn't come across it, but thank you for sharing this source. But for our work, actually, I think this is one of our contribution, at least in the Traces project that has already gone, and this is actually the result of it was this artwork. We are using art and performance and innovative methodologies, in addition to, of course, the classical interviews and focus group discussion. And also we're using digital artifacts. So basically all this performance and artwork is going to be, it's already actually, by our collaborators is being archived, and this Traces digital archive culturally will be launched. I think Idrissa also, there was a question about integration. Also, integration is a very, very thorny concept, both in the global south and the global north. In the global north, because it's a state control dictated, and using certain indicators that might not be respond to how people really integrate. In the global south, at least in Egypt, integration is not recognized by the migration policies or the government. So people actually do what you can call de facto integration, using what I have presented in our work, this infrastructure, hospitality, conviviality, counteracting hostility as well. So there isn't formal integration policies, but of course, if you share the language, if you share the religion, you are better off than someone who doesn't share the language or religion.
Thank you so much, Navita. She can use the mic.
Just for you? Yes. Can you hear? Okay. So I had like three, four questions. Let me tackle them according to how we KP. The first question was, how do this experience affects minors or other age girls or teenage girls? And I'll first start by acknowledging that this is where my study limitation meets.
I didn't actually prioritize this because of the complexities of the topic on sexual harassment and child protection mechanism, especially where the child protection mechanisms are very weak. That is one. And there is risk of re-traumatization from the experiences, and how do we eventually solve that, because we're just there for the study. And also the complexities of parental consent and ethical obligation around mandatory reporting. However, we picked up a few insights from the focus group discussions we conducted with the women. We could hear them constantly mention that they're worried that if these incidents happen to them, they're quite sure, not that they're quite sure, these things actually happen to their daughters. It's just that we couldn't interview their daughters. And now they are forced to start teaching their daughters on coping mechanisms, like building agency. For example, they'll tell their daughters like what times to go to fetch water, with whom to avoid, with whom to go with at the water collection point, and or when they're going to fetch food. So these women are constantly worried about the safety of their teenager, something that they shouldn't be doing in such a scenario. We also noticed that the reporting barriers likely applies to the minors as well, and we will say that this offers a very concrete hypothesis that requires a dedicated, ethically grounded research. So if anyone wants to go into this, we totally encourage that. The second question was on how some of the psychosocial effects that were experienced. Yes, we were able to pick a few, though our study was looking at the structural barriers. So we picked up 3 things. One is that the women experience hypervigilance, as in they became extra sensitive to their surrounding. If you want to go to fetch water, you think twice, like, should I really go? Do I need really to go? But you see, this is a basic need. You cannot survive without water. You cannot survive without food. Still need to go, but you have to think twice. Become extra sensitive. Even ask your neighbors if you or your friends if they can go with you. There is also an experience of social withdrawal, where some of the women after this experience, they do not want to socialize with their friends because they think their friends will, or the community will stigmatize. Actually, and for some communities, they undergo stigmatization, because some communities, like we had communities that are very conservative, and if a woman undergoes this, it means they are limited, like they are exposed to, I don't want to mention the communities, but you see, in this community, if a woman undergoes this experience, it means the chances of them even getting a spouse or a husband, they are very limited. If it's a girl, they're cut off, like people do not want to associate with them. And this makes them to withdraw from social events. Then there is internalized shame. So the first one is external, but this one, it's internal, like it is themselves, self-stigmatization. They feel like, oh, I shouldn't have maybe done this, or they feel like it is them that made this to happen to themselves. I don't know if I'm making sense. That the cause of the incident. Yeah, they blame themselves. Yeah, which shouldn't be happening. Then the last question, not the last, but the second last question, let me just check. So there was a question if we are able to identify the perpetrators. Yes, we were able to pick. So there are a few mentioned that some of the perpetrators were actually fellow refugees or IDP. But majority, they also say that they are the humanitarian staff, like the people that are supposed to be supporting them, because these are that is where now power dynamic comes, because these are the individuals that are supposed to support them, give them the basic needs, shelter, food. And if they do that, it becomes even more complex as compared to when it's a fellow refugee. When it's a fellow refugee, now that is where now the issues of social stigmatization comes in. Yeah. And so there was a question on the type of violence. Yes, because we're talking about sexual harassment, we are looking at things like inappropriate body touch. And this happens a lot from the pictures I did share. You see, maybe you're going to pick something and someone holds you or touches you inappropriately, signifying something. Or someone, the other time I had someone in the group saying that, if someone tells a woman, I'm giving you this thing, but I'll need payment from you. And the same statement is used to a man. They mean totally different things. There's also use of inappropriate language to the women. Maybe it could be seductive or not seductive. Or it could also be attempted rape. And you see some of the policies around gender-based violence are actually more focused on the extreme issues of gender-based violence like rape. And if it's an attempted rape and there's no evidence, it means there most probably no legal or little legal action will be taken around this. I think I've answered all of them.
Thank you so much. So we have numbers, I think 6 to 9 now, and maybe we can take 1 or 2 afterwards. But who's number 6? And where's Ertan? He's not here. Ah, yeah, sorry.
Thank you very much for a strong panel this morning. My question goes to Amira. You started us off with this wonderful walk through history and a time period in which solidarity was defined primarily, at least in the global East, as a state level sort of foreign policy almost. Now, when we've been speaking about solidarity here, we've been mainly speaking about an intercommunity or intra-community social definition of solidarity. And I wonder whether in your work with the refugee communities in Egypt, you've come across any references to this earlier period of the 1960s when solidarity is discussed or when conviviality is discussed. Has this ever come up? And then like Irian, I was also very much stricken. What's the past? Struck. There we go. Struck by the beautiful artwork on your slides. And again, first of all, can you just share that digital archive link that you mentioned in your response with us, please? That would be great. And then also in the artwork, how do you see the theme of solidarity and conviviality being taken up in the actual artwork, not just in the making of the art?
Thank you. Number 7, Asaf, I think.
Yeah, thank you. My question, thank you again for great panel. I have couple of questions, but I'm going to ask one to Baba Bumi. I have big issues in terms of understanding what actually is resilience theory. I think it's a very neoliberal concept because it sort of separates those who made it, those who don't make it. So those who make it, they are sort of presented as working hard, very determined, and it's very problematic. And you have like 3 million. I would assume out of the 3 million displaced people, probably only 1% who made it. And what about the rest who don't make it? I think the fact that you are alive is already a resilience, and you don't need. You might need it, but I don't think resilience is just limited to the material aspect. I mean, and that is very problematic. I would argue. So.
Okay, number 8. 7, sorry.
Thank you, all 4 presenters and the moderator. Question for William. I'm happy that that place is getting transformed where there are businesses, green business, fish business, or all that. But my question is that in a way that is symbiotic, where both the host and the IDP are benefiting? Do you think it is sustainable, or I mean, sometimes it could temporarily be a good one, and in the future we don't know whether that is sustainable and would bring a durable solution, or is leading to cohesion. If you reflect, if that is really helping for better integration and cohesion. For Amira, it's only a technical question. I mean, in the last, you said in the last 3 months, the space is becoming even more constrained in Egypt. What is the impetus, or what context has changed it, or the policy space there? Thank you so much.
It doesn't matter, just start. Ladies first. C'est ça.
Bon, merci et bonjour à tous et félicitations pour toutes les présentations. C'était si intéressant. Ce qui me marque le plus, c'est que j'ai envie, si ça devient un papers, c'est ce qu'on fait là aujourd'hui. J'ai vu une corrélation entre le travail de Esther, mon travail, et celui de Wilson plutôt. Et moi, j'ai constaté qu'il y a une sorte d'économie morale, selon Thompson, que nos travaux font ressortir. Et ça, je pense que il faudra vraiment repenser et bien valoriser cette économie morale que nous, on ne considère pas ou bien on invisibilise dans le déplacement forcé ou bien que ces peuples migrants importent auprès des pays hôtes ou bien les communautés hôtes. Et pour William, c'est bien ça. Ce serait mieux, juste une suggestion, ce serait mieux de définir cette notion de vulnérabilité dans le contexte de migration forcée ou déplacement forcé par rapport à votre sujet, puisque si on parle de insécurité alimentaire, par exemple, il y a une autre notion de cette vulnérabilité des personnes qui sont considérées vulnérables. Et dans notre cas ici de déplacement forcé ou migration forcée, c'est quoi alors ces vulnérabilités? Il faudra bien le définir. Merci.
Okay, we have one more, and please already prepare that I will start with you this time for the discussion, so the other way around.
Okay. Thank you. I think Amira already clarified one of my questions, but I just wish to find out from Amira, for how long will they be resilient, considering the circumstances in Egypt that these people are going through? And then for Nadifa, on a lighter note, I just wanted to ask her, we are talking about rethinking. Did you bother to find out violence against men? Psychological violence. Did you try to find out? Because there's an increasing phenomenon also of in some other areas where there are forms of violence against men. Did you try to find that out? Thank you.
Et juste une question. Est-ce que tu peux répéter ta question à Nadifa? Parce qu'il y avait... Oui. Ah, William.
C'est pas lui, William? Wilson. C'est lui qui a parlé de vulnérabilité. Tout à l'heure, c'est l'un de vous. J'ai juste le nom. Oui, on était en train de parler de vulnérabilité des personnes déplacées. Et du coup, ce sera mieux vraiment de bien... Et quand on a parlé tout à l'heure de vulnérabilité et on a parlé des femmes vulnérables, et moi je me suis dit ce serait bien de définir cette vulnérabilité en termes de migration forcée ou déplacement forcé, qui est aussi différent des gens ou bien des femmes ou des personnes vulnérables en contexte d'insécurité alimentaire par exemple, ou bien en contexte de gestion des risques catastrophes. Et c'est quoi alors cette vulnérabilité? Ce serait mieux de bien souligner ça. Et je crois que puis j'ai parlé de notre travail, de mon travail, de celui d'Esther, de la vôtre par rapport à cette économie morale qui est invisibilisée et qui sont utilisés par les communautés hôtes, et que aussi ces migrants l'importent, qu'ils l'utilisent entre eux-mêmes et qui serait mieux de le valoriser. C'était ça ce que j'ai expliqué tout à l'heure.
Yes. Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I have a number of questions for. Pardon? Okay. Now, the first one is to Amira. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. For different concepts complex concepts coming together, making that great sense. Just to focus on one thing. Because others are already taken care of. This issue of state of stuckness is quite interesting because yesterday Chamina mentioned how the Moroccan government get money from Europe, from EU. We have sent or almost published paper on how that outsourcing of European external border changed a refugee camp from a space of transition or transit space to space of stuckness. Many of those who came to use it as a planning space for onward migration are stuck. Now you're saying Egypt. So I think that needs broader thinking and bring together those all. I think this conviviality in what you said amid increasing policing is already asked. So thank you very much for all those. For Nadiva, I like again your presentation very much. Two things. One, mentioning or listing these geographies of violence, like water collection center, food distribution center. I don't know why you forgot firewood collection center. I mean, on the Ethiopian side, one of the geographies of violence for women is firewood collection center. Second is this. I mean, you said this is a structural violence. There's a structure to sexual violence, and but you took most of them to individual perpetrators. And what has changed recently in conflict is people. The opposite side usually use sexual violence as another means of war. It's a group that involves in it, not only individuals interested in seducing and so on, but also it's a group attack. So sexual violence is no more individual in many of the conflicts we see today. For Bababuni, I mean, it's already said by Asaf about resilience, but also there's another phrase by this neoliberal group that is self-reliance. Talk about self-reliance, where you didn't mention it, but they talk about self-reliance of displaced people, where there is no infrastructure of self-reliance from the bottom. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sure. So I just noticed that I left out one question. Sorry. Yeah, from last time. There's a question that if we were able to interview any camp managers or people in charge of the camp management. Yes, we did few interviews for some camp managers, and the issues that some of the insights they gave us is that because of some of the way the conservative nature of some of the communities in the refugee centers, it is a challenge to them to even receive reporting because of what is going around. So they have to be very proactive to go out and do community sensitization, and also even work with some of the community champions and people to refer them to some cases, because sometimes it's hard for individuals to report themselves, or their families also inhibit reporting because of the family shame. There is also, there's a question if there are structures for reporting. Yes, some of the camp had safeguarding officers, but some of the position were just there on paper, but there is no actual individual. Or if you get a safeguarding officer, this person is multitasking other roles. And if someone is multitasking with other roles, they tend to give more priority to more things they term as more urgent, like food, or giving priority to other tasks and not this one. There's a question on violence against men. So to be honest, at a personal level, I do acknowledge that this is an emerging issue, and it's not just emerging. I believe that this is something that has been happening, but because of the nature and perception of how the patriarchal system of our society, men are actually more stigmatized, or they like, it's hard to find a man or to make a man to go report an issue of sexual harassment because of toxic, let me just use the term toxic masculinity. Yeah, apparently. So it needs someone to go out to do research, and also for actors to actually actively come in this and this, to create some sensitization so that you are able to create an environment where even men can actively report. The statistics will show low data, but it's not because it's not happening, but because it's not being reported. Mentioning of geographic areas for the, so we use purposive sampling, and we also looked at the factors such as resources and access to contact person different. So we have some places where it was hard for us to get. We understand that, but we are open in case if we have someone like you that who can make us get to such areas, then it becomes easier for us to conduct. Then the last question on sexual violence as a tool of war, we do acknowledge that, and this is actually very active in Sudan, in southern Sudan, especially with the paramilitary. That is the most inhuman tool that they use on the communities. Though our study did not focus on that because we were focusing at the IDP level, and once the persons have already settled in the camps. Thank you.
Thank you again for all your questions and comments. I'll start with Marcia. Solidarity, inter and intra. Actually, if I speak about my research, because these are two different research style and topics. So I think the more collaborative, because of its nature, my project that's called we call it Traces, but it means we're trying to reconceptualize cultural heritage from the perspectives of migrants and refugees through tracing memories of mobility, of violence, and of solidarity. So basically, that was a multi-sided project involving 4 countries, including Egypt, Tunisia, Italy, and the UK. And within that, we had the flexibility to use this, untraditional or not orthodox, kind of methodologies that I mentioned, including the exhibitions and the performance and music. And within that project, we actually, migrants found space, and they were actually they were leading the project. They said, we lost one of the father of journalism of Sudan. In Sudan, for example, was forcibly displaced into Egypt after the war, and the journey was really difficult. And then a few months later, he passed away, and that was a shock for Sudanese. So they asked to organize commemoration activities, and the project responded, and it was actually a very big event. So all these activities under what is called Traces of Mobility digital archive. It is there. There is a website for it, but it's not officially launched because they're still working on it. As I'm talking to you, our collaborators are working on the archive in Cairo, and pro bono, because the project already closed in December last year. So basically, how this solidarity or conviviality, what does it make, and what art and music performance make? Basically, it fights exclusion, because actually the public space in Egypt has been and increasingly becoming very limited and very restricted to migrants and refugees. So basically, we're using the umbrella of our university as academic institution. There isn't, of course, again, independence of academic institution or anything, but AUC as an American university has some sort of like a special status. So what we do inside the camps is not really, until now, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, but we're actually free. And then, of course, because I had a research that was actually generally funded, when they asked me, why are you doing a concert? I was like, field work. It's my ethnography. I do it the way I like. But basically, these were all community events. And of course, I was learning from it too, for the research and for myself. So we were actually through that, through this conviviality, through us getting together, we're actually fighting exclusion outside the project. So basically, we're creating space. And we're creating also infrastructure. And this might take me a little bit to the point of Sarah about, the protracted. But even if there is no protraction, even if there is no pre-existing networks or infrastructure, people, when they arrive, they create ones. And they become history. And they become pre-existing infrastructure after that. So I don't know if I answered your question about conviviality. Yes. Yeah, I have to go on. So I hope I answered your question about conviviality, but we can talk over lunch if it is not enough. And then to Ababao, your question about the last 3 months, of course we don't know, because unfortunately there isn't transparency about, there are now, in the past, UNHCR was the leading, actor in regulating the refugee regime, the legal one. But now, actually, in the last 2 years, we see proactive measures taken by the state to nationalize the refugee regime. And for the first time in the history of Egypt, a refugee regime came out in December 2024. Like 1 year ago. So I think this is actually a measure taken to facilitate this transition from international organization to fully nationalize the refugee regime. And for the last 3 months, I think because the last 3 months, they started to write the bylaws, the executive, statement or whatever it's called, for the new law. And a standing committee for refugees started to come into place. So I think this is actually preparing, paving the way, cleaning, if you would like, before because the law has actually obligations to provide education, employment for refugees. They don't know how to do it, but at least this is what the law is saying. And I think the law came as a result of the pressures, exerted by the EU. They are giving them money to regulate the borders, the northern borders, so migrants get stuck and not move to Europe. But now even the southern borders, where Sudanese used to cross, they are also now being made more restrictive, because before the war, Sudanese had the right of mobility to come to Egypt without a visa, based on a bilateral agreement called the Four Freedoms Agreement. And 2 months after the war, the EU gave to Egypt 100 million euros to support the Sudanese refugees, and then Egypt came with a visa regime for Sudanese. So all Sudanese have to obtain a visa before that. But these actually raids are really dangerous. And actually, many international human rights organizations are declaring Egypt as unsafe place for refugees. And even in Ramadan and Eid, usually these police raids become quiet. You don't actually go, except last Ramadan. So something is happening. And actually many people, sorry, I didn't talk to them about my slides, but at least we know that 4 people were dead, confirmed dead, in the police stations before their deportation. So the state actually now creates what we can call forced irregularity, because they say to people, wait, they give them appointment to do their residency next year, and then meanwhile they arrest them and send them back to Sudan and Syria and other countries, not only Sudan, but of course among Sudanese is really very harsh and very visible. And for FECADO, it's actually related to what I have said about stuckness. People are literally stuck. So basically the EU is paying money and really generous packages, 7.4 euros, 7.4 billion euros last year, and another 4.2 billion euros. And part of it to make Egypt safe, attractive country for migrants. And we know that the EU 2 months ago came up with a list declaring that Egypt is a safe country, meaning that if you travel from Egypt to Spain, Spain can accept Spain. Spain now is nice. Another country, they can send you back to Egypt because Egypt is a safe country. So, and I think I totally agree with you. Not only Egypt, but I think Ethiopia too, and Eritrea. The EU, unfortunately, has no problem to make agreements with dictatorship to do, you know, this externalization policies. I think it's a very, very important issue to be discussed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your questions. I will be starting with Asaf. He said he was talking about how resilience theory, the limitation of resilience theory. That is the. I actually read through David Chandler. 2014, he wrote about resilience, rethinking resilience and all that, and he talked about the level of preparedness when you're talking about resilience. That you don't just once you get into a crisis, is beyond the crisis. It should go beyond. It should go to how I put it now. The crisis itself should once you want to resolve a crisis, you should go towards the root cause of the crisis. Then after then you begin to tackle it headlong and all that. But one of the major issue is that for resilience theory, it's about empowerment. It's about self-reliance, as it spoke about, and it's a bottom-up approach to solving issues of solving societal issues. Because most times when you look at solving societal issues from the top down, you begin to these people that are affected might not actually get the solution from it. And Eastern Calabra, one of the, I read her work, and she mentioned about how how refugees in the interwar era, how they actually solve their issues with from the bottom-up approach. Then that actually inspired my work also in looking at the fact that, okay, look, these people had very minimal government intervention and humanitarian intervention. And because someone is in Calabra have actually used, wrote on it, I can actually use it for my work. And Temitope's work too actually talks about a kind of solving their issues from bottom up. And there are so many spaces all over Nigeria. In fact, when I was interviewing one of the pastors in EYN, he said that the last convention they did in Abuja, some of their members were there, they were internally displaced persons, and they lived in Nasarawa State. It's a border state to Abuja. And he said that they are actually doing well too over there. The people of Goza, they are spread around because they are mostly affected. They are spread around the country. That, in fact, they were so happy that these people had actually gotten their life, gotten the pieces of their life together and bounced back. So it's an issue that the government in Nigeria is not actually doing anything about it, and the solution must actually stem from themselves, from an internal perspective, from the individual himself. So it's a theory that I had to adopt. Yeah, it's a theory I had to adopt so that it can fit in my work. And I adopted it with social capital, because social capital has to do with the, like what she said, infrastructure, external infrastructure, that is the social network, the trust that is outside of this, that is outside of themselves. As in, resilience is an internal thing. The self-reliance, the empowerment, the creativity, the innovation, the adaptation and all that. But why the social capital is an external physical infrastructure that has to do with friends, the church, their relations or relatives and their family members coming to rally around them to empower them in a supportive way so that they can actually bounce back. So those two theories, they are bottom-up approaches to policy implementation and all that, to driving development, individual development and sustainability. And he mentioned about he mentioned about symbiotic relationship. Yes, the environment where these IDPs are, they're actually benefiting immensely because of their arrival. They are actually benefiting because now the governor of Adamawa State right now has actually built a kind of a well-structured market for the fish sellers right now. And because after my field work, when I actually called and they said they've done something for them and that they don't even want them to leave to Borno State again because of the taxes they are collecting from them and because of the job they get and the multiplier effects, let me use that word, of the markets. So yeah. Okay. I want to put here that the local economy is actually thriving and is sustainable. It's something that, like, let me use this statement for one of the hosts. He said that these people just came and they have actually dominated every space of their economic life, both the small and medium scale enterprises, and that they, in fact, those things that they omit, they don't even look into. They are doing it, and they are building their life back, building houses, and sending their children to school. Thank you.
That's a very long sentence. Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce qu'il y a des questions pour moi? Je ne pense pas. C'était plutôt un apport que madame a fait, n'est-ce pas? C'était un apport qu'elle avait fait par rapport à mon travail. Il y a d'autres questions?
Sorry, we have to take the bus today, so I cannot extend the time we have. I think we directly jump to Stefan's presentation now and wrap up the conference. Thank you to the great organizers, presenters, and questions.